Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Ashley and I have a fun video. So it's actually a tag video, and apparently this tag came out probably about 2 months ago at this point because every video I watched was basically recorded in May. So I'm talking about the eyeshadow palette tag, where we talk about all our eyeshadows, like the biggest ones, the smallest ones, the ones with our favorite memory and whatnot. And this tag was actually created by Samantha and Allie Glines, so I will link their videos down below. And I had so much fun watching everybody's video. I had a lot of fun watching the Fancy Faces video. I've been watching her way before I was on YouTube, and so I kind of knew some of the things that she was going to say because I've been such a fan of hers. And then she has kind of like a unique collection outside of everybody else's. Then I enjoy what Angelica was going to say because you know she is across the pond. She is in Sweden. And I enjoy what Amy had to say because she has all the indie makeup. So I decided I wanted to do this challenge, and I know I'm late, but you know what? It is 2020 and I am doing the best I can do. And yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in with the palette tag. So first question up is, what is your newest palette? So my newest palettes are actually like two newest palettes. So I received these. This is from Hank and Henry. And so I picked up the Teddy palette and I picked up the Poison palette. They had a little mystery box that came out in June. And when I saw this palette especially, I just knew I had to have it. Look at the color scheme in this palette. It is amazing. And it is just really giving off those Poison vibes. You have the green, you have the fun pop of neon green, you have the purples and the blues. And this palette looks so great. Let me remove this so you can see it better. And I do owe you guys a video on this, so that will be coming soon. And then they had a companion palette, which was called the Teddy palette. And this one was a little bit more dark and mysterious, but still very beautiful wearable colors. And this is what the Teddy palette looks like. So these are my two newest palettes. And of course you guys have seen that I have the Natasha Denona Bronze palette and I have the Pat McGrath Divine Rose too. So those are some honorable mentions in my collection of new palettes. So next up is, what is the oldest palette? My oldest palette in my collection, which is probably in a lot of people's collection, is the Urban Decay Naked palette. Now, I did not buy this palette when it first released. I think I was like on a makeup break, or no, I was just using really what I had in my collection. I really wasn't expanding my collection. The only makeup I was really kind of buying for a long period of time was lip glasses and luster glasses from MAC Cosmetics. And at that point, I was also still kind of, when this came out, I know this is the very first eyeshadow palette, I was very much a MAC girl. And I had some MAC palettes that you could make and all the little quads and all that stuff. But when I moved into my condo, there was some mold issues. So that kind of ruined those makeup. But so, as of right now, the oldest palette in my collection is the Naked palette, which is actually the palette that started everything. Yes, let's do palettes because you have all the eyeshadows you pretty much need to make multiple looks, and it's already curated for you where you don't have to go out and pick out single shadows and all that other stuff. So Urban Decay was very innovative. Of course, this is the very first Naked, and this Naked was actually discontinued, and the Naked series is basically evolved into, I'm not sure, is a purple Naked now. I'm not sure who's naked in purple, but you got cherries. I mean it's a whole thing. So next up is, what is my most expensive palette? So coming in at $129, we have Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. And this is actually the palette I'm wearing today. I thought it would be fun to wear a palette that I'm actually talking about today. And this is gorgeous. So, but I did not spend $129 on this. So I talk about Ebates all the time. When you're shopping, get your cash back. So I was able to have some cash back. The palette was on sale with the Sephora VIB. So I actually paid half price. I only paid $60 for this palette, and I'm so glad I did pick it up. I basically was not going to pick this up. I did a Will I Buy It series on this palette, and I just basically said that if you were to cover up this side, this whole side of the palette to me looks like my Colored Rain Safari Rain palette, and I was like, I don't need it. I don't need it. And then over here it's just warm and it's a pop of blue, but these colors are amazing. I have FOMO. I'm glad I picked it up on some type of sale. So yes, she's very expensive, but I tried to get some type of discount, put a gift card together any way I could finagle it to purchase my Natasha Denona palettes. And for that matter, Pat McGrath, because she is only $4 cheaper when we're talking about the big mothership palette. So on the flip side, for the most affordable palette, I have the ColourPop Make Up Your Mind palette. So this technically I got free when I placed the order, and this palette was maybe 2 or 3 years ago where ColourPop had you vote on various different eyeshadows that you would like to see, and they basically landed in a 6-pan palette. That makes no sense, but the shadows are actually really pretty if you look at them individually and not how to make a full look. But if you can make a full look out of here, I mean, you could do maybe like this shade and that shade. You can finagle it, okay? So this is my least expensive palette because I did not pay for it. But if you want to stay true to the rules, my least expensive palette would be the Main Squeeze palette. And I have several of these little 9-pan palettes that were in the monochromatic schemes from ColourPop. And this one happens to be the Main Squeeze palette. It's one of my favorites. And this one is $12. So this is my technically least expensive palette. So next up, I really struggled. The question is, what is your everyday palette? I use whatever basically has come out. I use that on a daily basis. So you guys know when I do my 3 and 4 looks, when I demo an eyeshadow palette, I'm always trying to show you a way that I can make the palette more approachable, maybe more daytime friendly, maybe more work appropriate. So I just don't have an everyday palette, but I am pretty satisfied with this particular palette choice because anytime I go on a trip, you know, when we're allowed to travel, you know, I live in the US, I can't even go to the EU anymore. I mean, what is really going on when United States citizens can't go to Europe? But okay, we're not going to digress. So when I would travel, and I like to travel a lot, I would take this palette with me, and this is the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. This palette is fabulous. This palette is permanent to their collection, which was a great idea, and the formulation of it is beautiful. I love how it has all these nice travel pictures on it of different places. You have a beautiful mirror, big, so you can do your makeup, especially if you're traveling, and you pretty much have almost every shade you need. So I feel like this is a very good everyday palette for me. I always take it traveling. Like I said, if I'm going someplace, if I'm going to be there for a week, I always take it because I don't like to take a lot of makeup with me unless maybe if I'm going to something super special and I'm like, yes, this particular quad or something has to go. But if I just want something that's just going to match all my moods, makeup aesthetics of that particular trip, I'm going to take this palette because I have nice warm pops of orange. I have my crease colors. I have some violets. I have my golds. I have nice transition shades. I have some murkier colors for doing smoky eye. It's really nice palette, and it's no muss, no fuss, and it's sturdy. And so I know that, you know, it's going to be okay when I travel, even though I keep it in my carry-on bag. Not to mention, I just had to move in with my mom for like about a month or so because my home flooded, and I didn't want to take all my palettes with me. So I just took this and like 2 more palettes just so I can have a little variety. So I would consider this an everyday palette for me, even though I truly do not have an everyday palette. So for my most colorful palette, I think myself and Samantha March actually had this in common. It was the Violet Voss Flamingo palette. So I have blue palettes, I have green palettes, I got purple palettes, but when we're talking about palettes that are just colorful, this is my most colorful palette. So this palette actually came out about 3 or 4 years ago, and it has some really nice tropical shades in there. And you have something of all parts of the rainbow, so that's why I picked it, because it wasn't just monochromatic. You have like some burnt oranges, you have a black just to kind of deepen up your look. You got turquoises, you have lavenders, you have yellows, you have oranges. You have a lot of fun colors in this palette. So it kind of makes me think about summertime. So this is actually my most colorful palette. So for my smallest palette, I actually have these two little babies right here. So you can snap them together as one palette, and or you can separate them. But if you separate them, technically these are my smallest palettes and they fit in my teeny tiny hands. I have the hands of a 4th grader, if you have never noticed. Very, very small hands. So I have small feet too. I wear a 6.5. So this is a little 6-pan palette. So, and it has a mirror. And so this is the Fenty Snap Shadow. So I have 2 of them. These came out at the beginning of the year. This is palette number 7. And this palette over here is number 3. Let me show it to you. And this was the deep neutrals. So these are my smallest palettes. They're really cute. The color schemes are great. Performance, So these are my smallest palettes. And for my biggest palette, it is the Jaclyn Hill Volume 2. Okay, you can always count on Morphe to be a big palette, because my other palette that I have by Morphe is pretty big too. So here she is, 35 shades. And literally one of the biggest palettes I have outside of a magnetic palette holder to hold single shadows. So we're talking about a pre-made palette. This is my largest palette. Oh, if we're talking about a palette that has the best memory, it would be my Pat McGrath Mothership 5. And this is the Bronze Seduction palette. And here she is. I mean, she's one of my favorite palettes, but she has a certain memory in my heart because this was actually my very first video on YouTube. So when I started my YouTube channel, I have been wanting to start a YouTube channel forever, and I never got the guts or the courage enough to start a channel. So I was preparing myself. I got a camera. I figured out what I'm going to do, and this palette actually released in time for me to kind of start filming a video, and I was already into Pat McGrath. And ironically enough, I only paid $25 for this palette at the same time. So that's when Sephora had launched their rewards program, or revamped it rather, and you can redeem 2,500 points, which is still a lot of points, not as good as Ulta, but you can redeem 2,500 points for a $100 gift card. And I did that, and I only paid $25 for this palette. So that is a fond memory. But the fondest memory is, like I said, this was my very first video on YouTube, and I think it took me about 3 tries. I filmed it, and then I realized I was blurry. So I was like, okay, the content is great, but I'm blurry. And so I refilmed it, and my cousin came over, who is pretty good at photography, and he helped me out with the lighting and making sure I had the lens in placement and all that good stuff correct. And so I refilmed it again. So then I filmed it, and I'm just like, how do I edit this? So I went and took a class at Apple because they have free classes on all their products. So this palette always holds a special place in my heart because it was my very first palette that I did a video on. And not to mention, it is just gorgeous. I mean, come on. When you look at these shades in Blitz Flame, honey, this shade is everything. I love Extreme Aubergine. I mean, all the shades, they're just so magical in this palette. So now it's time to show a palette that is worth the hype. So you know, like, it's so hyped up and everybody's just waiting to get their hands on it. So I have 2 because these 2 really deserve it, okay? And going again with Pat McGrath, and this is Mothership 4 Decadence. So Decadence came out, I want to say, at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, and it had just kind of broken through, and we had just had the initial launches of Mothership 1, 2, and 3. So people were like, ooh, this is expensive, $125. But I kept seeing this palette. And you guys know I am a sucker for a red tone. And I already had my first Pat McGrath palette, which was Mothership 3 that I received for Christmas. So I did not think I should pick up this palette, but then something told me to pick up the palette because my grandmother sent me a check for Christmas and it was for $125. And I said, you know what? I'm going to buy this palette because if I just put the money in my bank account, I'm going to buy gas and blah, 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 adult stuff. So I said, I'm going to purchase the palette and just refund myself. So that's what I did. And I am so glad I did because this palette was actually limited edition when it came out. And now that everybody knows about it, Decadence has had so much hype. And this palette is literally worth it. It has been in and out of stock, out in stock, came out, we went back out of stock. You name it, the palette has been through it and people have been trying to get their hands on it. So a lovely subscriber actually just told me that she made the palette permanent, which was a wise decision, especially after the debacle of at the end of Christmas with this palette coming back out as the Star Wars special edition packaging, and all the Star Wars fans just bought it up and people still couldn't get their hands on it. So since then she's had about 2 more restocks, maybe 3 at this point since last Christmas. But this palette is worth it. It is an all shimmer palette. It has her beautiful shimmer satin foil shades in here, and the shades are simply divine. I sound like Mother Pat. Divine, okay? Now, this palette is gorgeous. It's jewel tones. It might not be a palette for people who say they're just like, oh, this is a standalone palette. But for me, this is a standalone palette, and it's an accent palette, and I love it, and it's literally in my top 5 of Mothership palettes. And any shade that you put on, you do not need to wet it. It's going to be foiled. It's going to be magic across your eyes. And you can blend these shades out in your crease with no issues. So I love this palette, and I think this palette was definitely worth the hype. Another palette that was worth the hype, it was supposed to be limited edition. It came out when the times were like, oh, we're warm tone shadows. We're living in. This is the Color Rain Queen of Hearts. This palette was like a Christmas special holiday edition, and it came in and it hit all over YouTube. Everybody was using it. Anytime you see somebody on Instagram, they're using this palette. Anytime you turn on YouTube, somebody's using this palette, and it got rave reviews, and for good reason. It went out of stock. Everyone's like, okay, you got to bring it back, because Color Rain does not release a lot of things. So when she releases something, it is special, okay? And you better get your hands on it, okay? And this palette was so highly requested. So they brought it back. It went out of stock again. They brought it back. It went out of stock again. And now they just had to make it permanent for a good reason, because like I said, it was supposed to be limited edition, but everybody loves this palette, and it's definitely a standout piece in the Color Rain collection. So this palette was definitely worth the hype. So on the flip side, a palette not worth the hype. And this makes me so sad to really talk about this palette. Okay, so Uoma Beauty, the Black Magic palette. And this is the Allure palette. So hear me out. If you don't know, Uoma Beauty came in roaring last year. They were like, this is our new campaign. We are inclusive. We are Black owned. We have complexion products. We have fabulous lipsticks, and we have 3 gorgeous palettes. And it was a mid-level brand, okay? And they were coming straight into Ulta Beauty, where most brands, especially if they're Black owned, we have to work our way up. We have to get the sales. We got to get our capital together. And then we can kind of go into a mainstream retailer. But Uoma Beauty was going straight in. And she had 3 of these Black Magic palettes. Now, this is the one that I actually kept. The quality is just, The color scheme is to die for, and so were the other 2, but the quality of the shadows was just like, And these things were not cheap, because like I said, this is a mid-range level brand. $45. Now, the lipsticks, excellent, and her complexion products, excellent. I mean, they had a whole campaign. It was on trend mood. It was just fabulous, the whole rollout of the brand. Okay, I'm going to try to edit that out, but those are fireworks. I'm really, really over the fireworks. Okay, so like I said, they had the whole campaign and they came out with these 3 palettes. So I've heard that the Carnival palette is a lot better than these 3 palettes, but I just can't give myself to declutter this palette, even though I do not use it. And sometimes I might just play around with the glitters, but look at the packaging. Do you see this packaging? And it's cardboard and it has that velveteen finish, and then it has inspirational messages on it. And just look at it. In theory, this should be great, but the quality is just so-so. So this palette was just not worth the hype for me. And then I have one that's such an unpopular opinion that you're just going to be like, what, Ashley? But I don't have it in my collection anymore, so I'm just going to show a picture over here. It is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance. Yeah, I said it. Palette was super hype. Hype. Everybody loved it. So I'm like watching it. I'm like, okay, I need to get my hands on this Modern Renaissance palette. So I check it. Ulta is out of stock. It's out of stock at Sephora. I'm just like, okay, I'm waiting. So I get my hands on this palette. I'm like, I'm going to love all these shades, like Love Letter and the red pinky. Nope. Doesn't look good on me. Not my complexion, even though you know I love a good red cranberry shade, but something about that pinky shade, when it's too pink, it just didn't look right on me. And it kind of looked like I was sick, and I just really wasn't into it, so I decluttered it. So the palette just wasn't worth the hype to me. I know you're going to fight me. That's fine. I'm okay. You can just get me in the comments. I'm totally fine. So we have 2 palettes left to talk about, and the next palette is show a palette from a favorite brand. So I always talk about this brand on my channel, and I've talked about them already in this video, and the brand is Colored Rain, and one of my favorite palettes is the Power Palette. This palette is so beautiful, and if you can, get your hands on it because I believe it's on sale. And it is just so pretty. I love purples. I love berries, like I just said. And the shadows, like I said, Colored Rain shadows are amazing. And like I said, she doesn't come out with very much. So when she comes out with an eyeshadow palette, you better get your hands on it. So this is a palette that I really, really enjoy. And you can just get so many great looks from this because you have this very vibrant purple. You have some duochrome shifts. You have a bronzy rose gold shade to kind of balance out some of the other shades. You have these beautiful buttery mattes that perform so well. And if you're a fan of the show Power that 50 Cent created, you will know that this just kind of goes right in with the theme. It's deep, dark, it's seductress, it's sexy, and that's what this palette is. I love it. So the next question, which is the last one, is what is your most used palette? And I really struggle with this because just like the everyday palette situation, I'm like, I use all my palettes. Like if this palette just came in, I'm focused on it for about a good week or so, week, 2 weeks, and then I rotate in and out. So I felt comfortable with this answer. And I'm going to go with the Nubian by Juvia's Place. Because when I look at it, I was like, I've had this palette in my collection for a very long time. And I remember buying it. It was the first palette that Juvia's Place launched. And it's very neutral, unlike basically what the brand looks like today. But I have some dips in some of these mattes. And I know that when I'm using certain type of palettes and I just need like some deepening shades or a good transition shade, I always go to this palette. So I'm comfortable and I know I can get complete looks out of this palette. And I've taken it traveling with me as well. So I would say that this is one of my most used palettes because I really cannot figure out. I wish it was something that just hit me on the head and say, girl, this one right here is the one that you have used the most. But I was, like I said, I really struggle with this. So I was like, well, the Urban Decay, Born to Run, and the Juvia's Place Nubian, I'm very comfortable with those answers. So I would have to go with that. So this is my most used palette. So I hope you guys really enjoyed the tag and seeing what was in my collection and my answers. And I really enjoyed talking about these eyeshadow palettes because you know I love some eyeshadow palettes. And with that being said, let me know down below. Let me know what your favorite palette is. Let me know what your most expensive palette is. Let me know what your everyday palette is because I'm interested to know what do you use on a regular basis. So with that being said, make sure you leave a comment, give this video a big thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel because you know I would love to have you here in my little makeup family. And with that being said, you already know what time it is. Time for the check. Yes, I hate these doggone fireworks. All right, y'all. Bye.